Have you ever achieved a game review of 000 in your chess.com games? Or maybe you have before but you would like to achieve it more often? If so, then you have come to the right place. Hey everybody, it is Grandmaster Max Illingworth here, and in this training I'm going to share with you how I managed to get all 6 out of 7 games where I didn't get a single mistake, blunder, or missed win on the automatic game analysis that was done right after the game finished. That's not to say that these games were absolutely perfect, but I think they still give a nice indication of how to play a good quality of chess in general. And these games are all bullet games, by the way. So, and to bishop c4, of course, we played a fork trick knight e4, realizing that we are going to regain the piece with interest, as it were. But the move queen e2 surprised me a little bit. Where after takes and d6, it just turns out that black is basically just a pawn up here. We're very solid position, and knight g5 might look a bit scary, but the move d5 is going to cut off the communication to f7. And, well, if they play queen f3, bishop e6 is just going to cover everything very nicely. And just leave black basically up a pawn for absolutely nothing when the dust settles as such. By the way, if you are enjoying this training so far, do make sure to leave a like, and also consider subscribing in order to access more of my chess training content in the future. So, after bishop to e3, I just played a move bishop e7, just stopping any knight g5 nonsense, long castles, and you can make an argument for a few different moves here, where, you could even just castle immediately. But during the game, I felt that maybe white will try to get some counterplay, like h4, and start to go for a pawn storm against my king, which I thought practically could be a little bit unpleasant, even though the engine thinks that bishop g4 is a pretty good solution to that problem. But bishop e6 white played, just being happy to exchange off the pieces when I am a pawn up. And this is by no means a worsening of black structure, as we do have 3 pawns in the center now to white 0. In the game, white played h4, but this just loses a lot of its sting when we're not even, forced to castle short. And I think that when we're a pawn up, this h6 is just a very nice prophylaxis, just not giving white any counterplay whatsoever. White played a move g4 going for the pawn storm, but as we can see, it just loses its sting when we haven't castled short yet and can still later on castle long. I think the move I played at queen e6, it might not be absolutely the strongest move, but I think practically it's a very good choice, because white's best option probably is to just go for an endgame, but it's a case where black is just a pawn up for nothing, the moves are just very easy to follow, and white does have some weaknesses on the king side as well, we might add. White tried to keep the queens on, we just castle, knight d2, and I will admit here I did overlook that I can just take a pawn with queen takes a2. Somehow the move just didn't occur to me. But fortunately the move I played at a6 is also pretty good at keeping the control of the position. I played a move d5, just taking over that space in the center. And notice how when you are up a pawn, you're not necessarily trying to do anything too crazily different. You're just still playing good logical chess. After take, I think my move I played here of queen f5 is a little bit inaccurate. Where it would have been more precise to flick in the move rook takes h1 first. Because in that case, there's going to be less pressure on the pawn. So you just avoid some things like, for example, rook h8 and rook d5, which I kind of realized the instant after I moved that actually this isn't quite a forced mate if they meet rook f1, h1 with rook d1. But of course we can still take the pawn and we should still win because the white piece is also terribly misplaced, and we have 2 extra pawns our majority on the king side, while the queen side majority struggles a little bit to turn into a pass pawn later, being a double pawn. The game ultimately concluded with knight to c5. Trying to remember this game, my opponent played on till checkmate. I'm not going to show literally every single one of these moves. Okay, here I did actually miss a chance to win a piece with takes and d4, which would have made things a lot easier, but okay, the way I played in the game was also good enough to win, where my opponent is simply down 2 pawns for nothing. The bishop is just biting on granite at this point. And the position just kind of plays itself. Like here, queen e4 is a good practical move to stop the counterplay on the queen side with b5. Queen c4 then just a nice way to fix the weaknesses in place, not give white an easy break. And then it's just basically a matter of technique, where I was able to transition to play just to a clearly winning endgame, where white just can't really do anything. We just push the pawns up, and white will either resign or they're just going to play on until checkmate. But yeah, I think from here you can see that the writing is on the wall. End up toying with them a little bit, but yeah, just end up promoting a pawn and just winning, as it were. So quite a nice little game, just beating my opponent without really giving him any opportunity whatsoever. And it goes show that even at the 2-400 bullet level, your opponents are still going to make some pretty big mistakes, which we can use to our advantage to win. This next game was one that actually was maybe not absolutely the most precise, but it was just a very smooth kind of game overall, where my opponent just tried to avoid Fury with this system with knight d7 and going for e5 at some point. I mean, black should probably just play e5 and then we can just transpose into the sort of territory with the Trimble systems when black plays knight f6 later. Something like this, and just going for long castles would be quite typical. But in the game, we had queen c7, and I'm a little surprised that my opponent didn't play the move e5 here. Kind of interesting point. The computer really likes g4 and just going for the pawn storm, but it's probably not the move I would have played if I had it in the game, let's say. But instead, after knight gf6, this gives me a very nice opportunity, which is worth emphasizing. And as the move e5 is now quite strong, just cutting off the plan of e5 and increasing our space advantage in the center. And you'll see, yeah, this is against the same opponent as the previous game, rated 2-400-ish. Knight d5, you could argue whether knight d5 is absolutely the most precise in response, but it's certainly clear this is a very, very comfortable structure for white, with the black pieces being very passive. Bishop d4 as I played is pretty natural. Black should probably go e6, but then you're just admitting that you're just much worse with absolutely no counterplay after normal moves, which is not really what you want out of the opening. So I played d5, kind of hoping to, with the move knight b6, try to get some play with bishop to g4. Now, if I'd been thinking a little bit more, I probably would have played a move like knight g5 and, just gone for the kill would have been much more to the point. But still, the move I played at castles actually doesn't spoil anything either, where it might seem that my opponent's move bishop g4 might allow black to potentially get out of the opening with a playable position. But here I found a pretty precise counter with flicking in the move h3, realizing that after take, the pawn on f7 will be very weak, and that if e6 have this very nice bishop b5 move, just to ensure that we will win the f7 pawn on the next turn as such. So that's why my opponent played bishop h5, but this gave me an opportunity where, actually, a computer says even better to play the move g4, and the move did occur to me, but I felt that in a bullet game it would be more practical just to keep my king safe, and that's why I played the disruptive move of e6, where you sacrifice a pawn, but just make it very difficult for black to develop the bishop from f8, and by extension a rook from h8, where something like if e6, I was probably just going to play queen e1, breaking the pin on the knight, and just buying that time to go bishop b5, and either knight e5 or knight g5, and just basically kill black on e6 in this case. In the game, my opponent played castles long, trying to make it a bit messy. We just took the pawn, bishop f7, knight e5, bishop e6, and already after bishop f4, the position is just lost for black, as black doesn't really have a good answer to the discovered attack from the bishop that's going to come from here. The best move maybe is rook d6, but then I can even just move the knight back and just pick up the exchange for a pretty comfortably winning position. In the game, after h6, knight g6, my opponent is just losing the h8 rook for absolutely nothing after the queen moves out of the fret, and this is why black resigned in this game. So these first two games, even though I was playing against 2-400 player, are actually very, very straightforward. The next 4 games I'm going to share, the ones where I also got this 0-0-0 on the automatic game review, these were games that were, sort of a little bit, let's say, felt a little bit tougher, even though my opponent's only rated 1900. But still, it felt pretty smooth the way in which I was able to win. And in this game, I actually used an idea from a past YouTube video of mine with playing the Hungarian variation. And I'd actually had just analysed this from a couple of other games I'd played elsewhere. So I kind of felt pretty comfortable already with these sorts of positions. I knew that the move a6 is basically useless for black in this Morochi bind, and will give us some good extra options at our disposal. The move rook e8 by black kind of indicates he doesn't really have a plan. A move like knight d7 would be definitely a bit more to the point by comparison. Just putting the knight on active square and clearing long diagonal for the bishop. But instead of this, black played rook e8, a pretty useless move in all honesty. And then the next move at e6 is basically just self-destructive and goes to show that sometimes to win a chess game, all you have to do is just give them enough rope to hang themselves. And if you haven't seen the move white should play here, this is not a bad moment to pause and try to figure out the answer. But assuming that, you've either done that or that you just want to see how I played it in the game, the move e5 is just very, very strong, where, knight d7, ed6 is basically a free pawn. Of course, they can't take on e5 because of the pin on the rook to the queen, this being one of the main early middle game principles in chess. But the problem with knight h5 is that it just allows me to go g4 and just win the knight directly. And it was pretty easy from here. Like, I just have so much energy of my pieces. Knight e4 even forking the queen and the pawn. First, after queen e5, we flick in h6, establishing the pawn around their king. And yeah, once it gets to an ending, it's just very easy where, like, even this c5 is kind of precise, just realizing that, you don't even care if they take, because it just brings your rook into the attack on the next moves. But yeah, the rest of the game was pretty straightforward. Like, I just played very natural moves, just continuing to play with the initiative, just completely putting black in a zugzwang. And then, I toyed with him a little bit. Like, I just sort of put him in the zugzwang where he just can't do anything and just kept very steadily improving the position. But yeah, eventually did end up being mate, and my opponent did, play it on till checkmate as such. Still, I think, this game is a kind of a good example of what white is aiming for when you play this Hungarian system, that if you can get in c5 or e5, then that can really cause black a lot of problems a lot later in the middle game. But as it was, we also had some other games, and this time my opponent decided to play it a bit differently, going for the move knight to c6 and playing the Lowenthal system with e5, knight b5, and a6. Of course, the move of d6 would be the Kalashnikov Sicilian. But yeah, after a6, of course, we jump in with the knight to the outpost, take. And if they played a move queen f6, you have a few good moves, like all of queen c7, queen f6, queen e1, queen d2 should all give white some sort of advantage, let's say. But my opponent played this shortcut of queen e7, and I've tried some different moves, but I kind of like queen d1 best of all, where you just sort of play to just exploit the gaps of black's position on the d file. And yeah, maybe black should just go for the move d6 and, just allow this, whole knight d5 transformation. But it's true that this position is, of course, going to be significantly better for white here. Like even just c4 and just normal development is just so good for white in this position. But, because you have the bishop pair and you have the space. But instead my opponent played this weird h6, just trying to prevent bishop g5 at any price. But that also gives me some pretty good options. It even occurred to me I could go bishop b3 and pretend to just play it like an English attack. But I decided to go bishop c4 and be a little bit more ambitious in the game. Just putting bishop on a very nice diagonal. Probably not the top line here, but it's, I don't think, such a mistake either. And yeah, my opponent's refusal to play d5, d6 for reasons that are going way beyond my understanding is, partly the reason how I was able to win this game. Well, after king h8, I just played a4, just stopping any b5 counterplay. He played knight a5, and again, like, his refusal to not play, like, d6, to refuse to play d6 was really costing him. As after bishop e3, he already faced a challenge of how to defend the pawn on b6. I was expecting him to go rook b8 and defend it that way, in which case I was probably just going to go queen d3 and just build up the position with, like, rook fd1, occupy the outpost, and just say that white is much better. But instead he played queen b4, and, to my credit, I actually realized that we can in fact ignore the attack on the b2 pawn and play a much stronger knight to d5. Of course, if they take, this is just completely ruining the black structure, and, we are also winning the rook, which helps. But after knight d5, yeah, I played bishop d5. Like, I realized the instant after I took that queen d5 would have been probably a little bit more precise with the fork. But bishop b5 is still very strong, and I actually found a pretty cool idea. Like, granted, almost everything wins for white, but yeah, c3 is just a really nice little touch. Set this subtle trap, actually, where they actually can't take the pawn on b2, If they do retreat, I was just going to go b4 and just grab all the space on the queen side, but the problem with queen b2 is I can just play the move queen d3, and I basically just win the queen on the next move. Or if they go knight b3, you have rook b1, and you skewer this way to get a winning position. But the game ultimately concluded bishop b7, rook fb1, and okay, I don't need to teach you guys how to win with an extra queen. Black did lose in a few more moves from this point. Moving on to the penultimate game I'd like to share. This one I played with the black pieces, and I normally don't play e4, e5 quite as much nowadays, but I sort of played it because the students I was coaching after this set of games, they play e4, e5 mostly as black, so I wanted to give them a little bit of material to work with. And yeah, in this game I got the fork trick once again. I mean, this game was basically just decided in the opening, like after take, knight e4, d5. Black is already just considerably better, and after d4, I'd already actually looked at this position from analysing some students' games in the past, because this is quite a common line at low levels. And yeah, I sort of knew that you don't even have to play like e4, but you can even just play bishop g4 and leverage the fact that after take, that you're already threatening to win the knight. And if they stop, they would move like knight hg1, like why is this nowhere near castling short? And, in such a position, it kind of plays itself with, bishop c5, the queen coming in, the rook coming in, and it's just all very, very smooth for black. So in the game, the move castles just throws it all away, like e4, I just win a piece. Position is already basically resignable, like you can't even take the pawn because the knight would be hanging. And yeah, I mean, the injury will tell you there were some slightly faster wins, but it really doesn't matter at this point. Here we are up material and we have the attack on the black king, on the white king, and yeah, at this point, white, for whatever reason, decided to play it on till mate, but yeah, it was over pretty fast. Now, to conclude this little training, I will also share with you this game that I played, the last one I played against the same opponent, where once again I decided to play the Hungarian variation. It worked quite well in the previous game, so I figured why not just go for it again. So queen e3, g6, bishop e2. And yeah, at this point he did play it a little bit better. He did play the move of knight d7 rather than the rook e8 that we saw in the previous game. But after my move rook d1, putting the rook opposite the queen, he already started to struggle a little bit to find a good plan. Now, I mean, black would be fairly happy if he could get the queens off, but of course we can also just keep the queens on in this position. We are by no means forced to allow the exchange in a sense. But in the game, queen c7 was just a little bit imprecise. I just get in to move knight d5 with tempo, and yeah, the move rook b1 is quite a precise prophylactic move, where you're just preparing to push the b pawn and develop your bishop without having problems like with bishop d2 and bishop b2, for example. It just sort of moves like an experienced player in a Maroczy structure will just play this really without thinking. After e6, knight c3, we can see how the pawn on d6 again becomes a bit of a weakness. And I was a little bit surprised that my opponent didn't try to defend it with a move like queen c7, for example. I mean, it is true, I can, in the worst case, play a move like queen d2 and just go after the pawn that way. Which, I mean, yeah, it is probably the way I would have played it in reality, even if a move like b3 and a more patient approach would also give a pretty serious advantage for white. But yeah, in the game, queen b6, I, of course, just took the pawn. And once again, black just really struggled to get any decent play. The move knight d2 is admittedly a bit careless, where I did realize after playing this at f5 would threaten knight f7 and f4, to which I would need to move the knight away to, keep my extra pawn in a sense. But yeah, after rook e8, it just becomes very smooth, like f4. Bishop f8's a blunder, but even something like this is also just should be winning for white, with black's pieces being so passive, as well as white being a pawn up. Like, even just e5 is just completely shutting out the black pieces from here in a sense. Well, at least until they play f6, but then e6 becomes a bit weak as a result. But after bishop f8, yeah, I just grabbed the material, and the rest was pretty easy from here. Like just putting the knights into the outposts, just not giving black any sort of semblance of counterplay. a4 is not even strictly necessary, but it just avoids any knight a2 nonsense. So yeah, bishop g5 is the move I want to play anyway. And yeah, I found a nice little trick of d7, going for the fork on the king and the bishop, as it were. And yeah, after some more moves, like for some reason my opponent played on till mate, but yeah, we're just winning, and black did, yeah, get mated at the end of the day. So yeah, that concludes the 7 games I played on chess.com, and I want to do a bit of a briefer analysis, because I'd previously done a lot of very long videos, and I think that having a bit of shorter content can give a bit of nice variety, especially for those of you who are maybe not so familiar with my channel just yet. But yeah, if you do want to make sure that you continue to receive notifications about my content as it's released on here, I would recommend that when you subscribe that you do tap the notification bell and set it to all. That's going to ensure that each one of my training videos do appear in your feed as I publish them, as it were. But do let me know in the comments below, what was the game that made the biggest impression on you here? You know, was there a particular move or a particular insight that was, you know, a bit of an epiphany? Do let me know about that in the comments. Definitely interested to, you know, hear different people's feedback for, you know, those who to, you know, do put in the extra yards and go through the full video. You know, nice work on that. Yeah, and in the next training videos, I'm probably going to also share like this kind of diary of sorts of me just like talking through some games I played online and sort of sharing my thought process, sharing the principles behind the moves I played, and essentially giving you like a brief kind of model of sorts for how you can try to play approaching this sort of level in your own games. I mean, Ironplay is not perfect here by any means, but I think it's something that is not so difficult to replicate when you train it for long enough, as it were. So yeah, on that note, I will see you guys in the next training video, and until then, take care.